Kia ora, my name is Mark Treadwell, and in this video clip we're looking at chapter 13 in the book, The Future of Learning. In this we're looking at the beginning of the learning process itself. And in order for learners, and we talked in the last video clip about learner educators, if they're to become learners, they have to be competent to do that. And in order to be competent, our young people need to be educated around how do they have a sense of competency, what underpins competency. And in 2007 in New Zealand, the curriculum there was released, and in there was the competencies for the first time. It was the first cut, it was the first time any country really had included the competencies in the framework for a teaching and learning program. And so it was a really big deal. But in the first cut we missed certain things, and with experience and in trialling the competencies in different schools in different countries around the world, we realised that the number one competency that young people need is to have a sense of identity, a sense of who they are. The fact that they talk to themselves is an incredibly important aspect of learning. Unless we introduce the young people to the fact they talk to self, they may not necessarily be cognitive of the process or the impact of that process. The amount of thinking we do in the negative can actually have a huge effect on our belief in self, and our belief in self to be able to learn, our belief in self to be able to play sports, belief in all sorts of different aspects. Our friendships, the conversations we have about the people that we befriend, is going to affect our relationship with those people. So our sense of identity culturally as well. So each of us comes from a different cultural background, and those cultural backgrounds also shape who we are and how we react in different situations. So identity is our first big concept within the structure of the competencies. Once we've got a partial sense of identity, we can start moving on to looking at thinking and questioning. And so the competencies aren't we complete identity, then we complete thinking and questioning, but rather we start with some work on identity and then we progress into some work around thinking and questioning. And with thinking and questioning, we can't think without questioning, and we can't question without thinking. Thinking processes are about questioning self. So the richer the questions we have for self, then the better and the deeper we're going to understand what it is we're trying to get an understanding of. So from identity we go to thinking and questioning, and from thinking and questioning we then migrate to managing self. And managing self is a really big gig. It requires a lot of understanding of ourselves. Hence we need to have a sense of identity, and hence also we need to have thinking and questioning before we do managing self. Because managing self requires asking questions of why do we do what we do? Why do we behave like we do? Why do we feel the way we do? So those emotions and all that aspect of growing up are all going to sort of percolate through this process. So we're not going to finish managing self by the time they're 7. That's going to be an ongoing process through the first 12, 13 years of schooling. After managing self, then we're going to start looking at collaboration, how we work with each other. And what has happened in the past is that we've been looking at this thing called the inquiry process. And generally speaking, in inquiry, what happened was the teacher ran around the classroom from group to group solving all their problems. Right? And that didn't work particularly well. The teacher got fitter, which is great for their fitness, but actually the learners were actually students in that space. They didn't have capacity or agency over their learning because they were not competent. And so we had to fill in those gaps. And so inquiry learning initiatives didn't really have the success we expected. And so we're now backfilling that and saying, well, listen, the competencies are necessary in order for them to get that. So once we've got the collaboration starting to happen, then we can start looking at connecting and reflecting. The young person's learning must somehow connect to their prior learning. And this is where educators take on this new role. We need to facilitate the development of their understanding sequentially over time. And that's really important. We need to connect whatever we're learning around now to what we already know. So there's a sequence that we can actually bridge from here to here to here and do that progressively. And finally, we need to develop a language of learning. And by the time we get to this point, the learners, generally speaking, have a language of learning already. So it may take 6 months to establish identity, and then you halve each one. So it's going to take 3 months to sort of work through the process of understanding the second competency, and then half of that again for the third, fourth, fifth. By the time you get to the sixth one of a language of learning, it only takes about a week and a half. So the competencies tier down, okay? But it takes considerable time to do that, 12 or 13 years to build a fully competent young learner. So we need to moderate our expectations around this, but those competencies must be educated, and not taught, but educated in a way which the learners want to do. Okay, they want to learn about those competencies. How do we do that? And this learning process provides us with a vehicle for that. But the competencies form the substrate of the learning process. Have a read of the chapter, work through that. There is a separate resource that will come out following this one on the competencies. And we unpack each of the competencies. There's a sample one. We've put identity into the last section of the book for you as an example, but the competencies themselves is a separate resource altogether. Okay, and you'll be able to download that from the website. Okay, thank you very much, and go and have a read of the next chapter.